YouTube, how the duck you doing? Films here, and today we have another Deadlock video. More specifically, I'm talking about how you can climb in Deadlock rather efficiently and effectively. Now, if you're new to this channel, I do a whole bunch of yapping with some gameplay in the background. You can think of it as some sort of a podcast, not some super fancy editing skills because, well, I suck at editing. But that's enough about that, let's dive into the video. Now, here's something nobody really wants to admit. Most players in your games don't actually understand how to play Deadlock, and I don't mean that in a toxic way. I mean literally, they don't understand what wins games. They load in, pick a hero, and just play on autopilot. They're not thinking about win conditions, scaling, map pressure, or even why they're doing what they're doing. They're just reacting. So what do people think they're actually playing? Well, you'll see players treating Deadlock like a completely different game. They run an enemy simulator, they just fight non-stop no matter the situation, no matter their gold or soul amount, and no matter the timing. They're also playing the random farming simulator game. Not similar to 2017, but the random one. They're hitting jungle camps all game, but with zero purpose, no timing, no transitions into impact, and of course the chaos mode, which is rotating randomly, taking fights they can't win, pushing lanes with no vision or reason, and just hoping something works out. So what's the real problem then? None of those players are actually playing Deadlock correctly, because Deadlock isn't just fighting or farming, it's knowing when to do each and why. That's the biggest difference. So why does this matter for you? Well, once you understand this, you stop expecting your teammates to play correctly, and that alone removes like 80% of frustration when climbing, because now you realize the game isn't stacked against you. Your teammates aren't uniquely bad, this is just a average lobby. So what's the truth about climbing then? Well, climbing isn't about being the best player in the world, dropping insane kill games, or playing perfectly. It's about the one important thing: consistency. If you farm when others are wasting time, avoid bad fights, don't throw your lead, understand your power spikes, you will win more games than you lose. Not because you're flashy, but because you're making fewer mistakes than everybody else. So what's the simple way to think about it? Now, you don't need to be a 10 out of 10 player, you just need to be a 6 or 7 out of 10 every single game. While everyone else is a 9 one game and a 2 the next, that consistency, that's what carries you through ranks. Now, if you remember nothing else from this section, at least remember this: you don't climb by being amazing, you climb by being reliable and consistent. Now, if you actually want to win more games and climb the ranks, you need to stop picking low impact heroes. Because here's reality, not every hero in Deadlock has the same ability to close out a game. Some heroes are great at utility, some are great at setup or helping teammates succeed. But if your teammates are consistent, those heroes lose value rather quickly and ultimately just fail. So what's the core idea behind this? Well, when you're climbing, especially solo queue, you don't want to support the win condition. You want to be the win condition. That's the difference. Now, I don't mean to say this in any mean or toxic way, but when you're playing solo queue, from my vast experience from multiple games and playing Deadlock itself, you can't always trust your randoms to really be that carry that you need. Sometimes you might have that one player on your team that's exceptionally good, who can absolutely dominate. Other times you might not have that and you just might get steamrolled. So if you feel that yourself, you're good enough to carry a game, then you should probably be picking those M1 carries or those hyper late game carries that can absolutely steamroll. So this is why that I find gunny carries are super strong. Not because they're necessarily super flashy, but because they solve multiple problems at once. The first problem is that they end the games, so objectives truly win matches. At the end of the day, kills don't necessarily win games. Basically, gun carries, they are allowed to melt walkers, guardians, destroy structures, burn the mid-boss, and way faster than most spirit-based heroes. So even if your team is completely messy, completely chaotic, nobody know what's going on, you can still convert small advantages into actual wins, whether it's split pushing, taking a walker, and so on. You can do this through the low ranks till about, I would say, maybe Phantom Ascendant around there. Then you want to start maybe shifting your focus of how you want to play the matches. Now, they scale harder than the lobby. Well, most players don't farm efficiently or effectively for a lot of the ranks. So when you're playing a scaling gun carry, take for example, Venator is one of the biggest examples, you're getting stronger faster, you're hitting spikes earlier, and you're harder to deal with as the game goes on. Eventually, you hit a point where the enemy team literally can't fight you straight up and they have to do or send multiple resources to deal with you, meaning your team in theory should be pushing other objectives while you're getting dove on, maybe taking out 1 or 2 enemies as well. Now, I guess they're harder to counter, because this is something a lot of players overlook, because most lobbies are filled with spirit damage or ability-based builds. So what do people buy? They build spirit resistance, dispel, and anti-ability items, which means if you're dealing gun damage, they're not itemizing you, and now you're doing full damage while everyone else is getting partially countered. Now, this certainly is the case in some aspects in certain scenarios, but they still have the opportunity to buy metal skin. This is why if you're just sticking there just perma farming, they're not really facing against you, so they're trying to counter build items for characters that are doing damage to you. That might be they're getting dove by a lash or any of these characters that are doing spirit damage, so eventually when you're there to take the fight, they don't have those needed resistances. Now, another big thing from this is that you can actually control the outcome. This is the biggest reason that gun carries give you the agency. Now, you're not waiting for teammates to necessarily engage, someone to land an ability, or perfect coordination. You can farm your lead, position correctly, and take over fights yourself, especially if you're playing a late game character like Venator, like Lady Geist if you're building the right build, or even a Haze. I do want to talk about the reality of solo queue. Let's be honest, in solo queue, your teammates will miss their abilities, take really bad fights, or just make completely random decisions. Now, before you start yelling and yapping into the team's communications, that's normal, honestly. So instead of picking a hero that needs everything to go right, pick one that can still win when things go wrong. Instead of soloing queue as a support necessarily and trying your absolute best to keep your carries alive and just gambling if the carry is good enough, just pick a carry yourself and try to win the game yourself. As much as this game is a team game, in the lower ranks and mid ranks, you can solo carry a lot of the matches if you're just positioning well and pushing lanes out and just doing everything you need to do the right way. So what's the simple way to think about this? So if your hero can't take objectives quickly, can't scale into a threat in a later game, or it can't carry fights, then you're relying on someone else to win the game. And honestly, in solo queue, that's a risk you don't necessarily want to take. Now, I do just want to quickly talk about this in section 3, and that is a duo queue honestly equals a cheat code. If you can duo, if you have someone you like playing with, they're decent teammates, or you might find someone you're playing in with a random match as you solo queue, pick them up, you have a good interaction. If you can't, duo, because the best setup is you equals a scaling carry, and your teammate or duo can pressure, roam, or look for picks, or they can play some sort of supportive character to enable your carry even better. And while they're making chaos, you're getting rich, and when mid-game hits, you're the strongest player on the map. All this is certainly true, so if you can't duo, definitely recommend it, but if you're forced to solo queue, there's nothing wrong with that, it's just a little bit harder. I think this is kind of where a big misconception about this game comes from, in that lane phase isn't necessarily about winning. This is where most games are quite decided, and most players don't even realize they're actually throwing, because they think lane phase is about one thing: I need to win my lane. But that mindset, that's exactly what loses games. So what's actually the real goal of the lane phase? Well, your job in lane is not necessarily to dominate. Your job is don't lose the game before it even starts. That's it. Because in Deadlock, one lane collapsing early can lead to snowball. It unlocks a ton of map pressure, and it makes the rest of the game sometimes unplayable. So in quotations, what do bad players do? When people get into a losing matchup, they panic. They take fights they can't win, they overpeak constantly, and they keep trying one more time. And suddenly, they're 0-5, then 0-7, 0-8, 0-10. And at that point, the lane isn't just lost, the game is basically decided, because those laners just get in a tremendous soul lead, buy powerful items, begin to rotate, start snowballing around the map. Even though this game has a really good comeback mechanic, it still is rather difficult to win a lot of those fights. So what do good players do instead? Good players understand something simple, and that is not losing is actually winning. If you're in a bad matchup, you play slower, you respect the pressure, and you farm what's safe. You don't necessarily want to ego fight, take a ton of poke damage. You don't try to outplay every situation. You want to minimize the damage. If you find yourself in lane being 0-2, you don't want to keep trying to take fights. You want to take a step back and to start farming safely. So let's talk about the goal, which is to stay relevant, and let me give you two examples. So player A, which is the ego mode, they go 2-6, 2 kills, 2 or 6 deaths. They try to fight constantly and they fall behind in farm. Whereas you have the smarter player as player B, they go 0-2 or 0-3, they play safe, but they keep farming. Who is more useful mid-game? Well, it's the player B every single time because they are still in the game. They're not losing that gap or using those deaths to kind of do nothing. They're still farming and trying to stay in the game. So what does playing safe actually mean? Now, this isn't just sit there and do nothing, it means positioning smarter. Stay near cover and don't overextend. Taking a guaranteed farm first. Secure what's free before risking anything. And then you want to respect enemy power spikes. If they're stronger, it's pretty obvious, you don't necessarily want to fight. And then letting waves come to you, you don't always need to push up for the waves. You only want to push out waves or shove into the enemy tower if there's some strategic advantage or some objective that needs to be done. Whether it's earn or the bridge buffs at 5 minutes, all those can be looked to try to play a little bit more aggressively. In the lower ranks, this isn't necessarily a major issue, but once you get to the mid and upper ranks, then you have to start thinking about this more. Shoving tower, looking for buffs, and looking for different objectives and advantages. Now, if I could give you one piece of advice in the laning phase of Deadlock, if you find yourself struggling in a lane, instead of asking, how do I win this lane, when you know it's necessary a matchup you're probably not going to win, you should start asking yourself, how do I lead this lane in a playable state? That one change in thinking, that's what separates players who climb from players who stay stuck. If you know you're going into a losing lane just because of character discrepancy, then you should honestly just try to play safe, farm up. Even if they get your Guardian first, it's not the end of the world as long as you're still on par of souls. Now, if I can give you a one-line takeaway from this, lane phase isn't about being ahead. It's about not being the reason your team falls behind. Now let's briefly talk about the mid game. If you want to see a full video on the mid game, let me know in the comments down below. But honestly, this is the biggest difference between ranks. So for low rank players, you typically will see a lot of fight chasing, you will rotate randomly, and you'll end up dying for no reason. Versus high rank players, they farm and they farm a lot. Your job, take safe waves, clear a jungle, avoid pointless fights. You're not necessarily playing for highlights, and you're mainly playing for a soul lead so that you're able to scale, buy items, and take fights when needed with an advantage. Another big thing where a lot of players make mistakes is knowing when to fight. You don't necessarily want to fight randomly, you want to fight when you're strong. That could be a key item, a level spike, a full build component. When you hit that moment, that's when you say, all right, now we go. And even if your team is behind, you become the reason fights are winnable. But also, when you're looking to take a fight, usually if it's a big team fight, it needs to go into something. It needs to go into an objective, whether that's getting the last Guardian on a lane, a last Walker, the first, second Walker, an Urn. Something needs to come out of a big team fight for that team fight to be reasonable, a good reason to be taking that fight. Because if you take a fight and nothing comes out of it, the fight was essentially a little bit pointless because you could have used that time fighting, you could have used it farming. So these are all reasons you have to think about, key ideas to think about when it comes to higher level play. Let's talk about the mistake that loses games, and that is overextending. This is the fastest way to throw a winning game. If you push too far, carry a huge unsecured soul bag, and get caught, you just handed the enemy an insane amount of souls that can buy them, let's say, glass cannon, ricochet, or some item that enables that character greatly that wasn't getting any value before. And usually with that one mistake, a game can easily be over and make the difference between winning and losing. So I do want to quickly talk about the mental difference and the two rules that changed everything for me. So rule 1, the 2-game rule. If you win 2, you could take a little bit of a break, then maybe come back. If you lose 2, you should probably stop and take a break as well. You never want to tilt queue in this game, especially because I feel that it's a rather emotional game. If you feel that you're doing so much, but your team isn't getting value, start spiraling downward. So knowing when to take a break is always a big must. And the second one is to be the voice of reason. Most players are just necessarily waiting for something to happen. They don't really know what to do. So you tell them what to do. Simple calls like go mid, push sides, reset and farm. That alone will win you a ton of games so that they know not to overextend. I've seen this time and time again in a lot of various ranks for this game specifically, that players just don't know what to do. So if you personally know what to do, maybe you can try to help your teammate in understanding what to do. They might reply in some, well, different ways, but still the rule remains the same. At least you're telling them something useful or maybe helpful. Now finally, why are you losing games? Most matches are decided early, not by mechanics, not by aim, by bad decisions, bad landing, and bad positioning. If you fix those, you don't just climb, you honestly get really good at the game and probably get all the way to Eternus, and I, for one, have done that myself. And if you got value out of this, make sure to drop a like, it helps a ton, and if you want to see more Deadlock guides, breakdowns, and ways to, well, actually improve it, definitely consider subscribing. I hope you have a great and safe day. Duck comes out.